In 2018, as a ministerial servant, I would stand on the platform and try my utmost in public talks to convince the audience that the God Jehovah existed. And yet at the same time, I had doubts. And there was one doubt in particular, a doubt that had been lingering and festering inside me since childhood, which when I properly got to grips with it and researched it, would single-handedly shatter my belief in Jehovah's existence.
Virus and COVID is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
If you were to ask a Jehovah's Witness, why would a loving, kind God who hates to see pain and suffering create a global ecosystem in which animals tear each other apart and eat each other alive? They would say, he didn't. Jehovah created all animals to be at peace with each other in a global paradise. The reason they say this is the same reason why I said it for so many years. I was told by the people who I instinctively trust the most, my dad, my family, my community, and God's one true organisation, that all life on earth was designed to coexist in a united global peace and paradise called the Garden of Eden. And that what we see today, the utter barbaric brutality of the natural world, was never Jehovah's intention for this planet. If we look at the Jehovah's Witness timescale, we are now living in a time period that's referred to as the last days. A time period in which, because Satan is in control of the world and Jehovah has withdrawn his Holy Spirit, animals, when they eat each other, are behaving in apparently an unnatural way. Post-Armageddon, we're told that our planet will once again be restored to a paradise, and animals will be reverted to their herbivorous nature of which they were originally created. I was aware that as this is a future prediction, of course there is no evidence for this. Likewise, there is no evidence that the Garden of Eden ever existed. And so the only part of the Jehovah's Witness timescale which I could actually verify was the world that I could see around me. A world in which even some plants consume animals. And so my doubt was regarding the truth of this timescale. Had animals only been eating each other for the last 6,000 years, or had it been far longer? I understand on this topic, to most people, questioning whether an animal like a T-Rex was herbivorous or carnivorous is an absurd thing to do. They would say, well, duh, of course it is a carnivore, of course it was a carnivore. They would say, just look at its skull. 60 serrated edge teeth, like giant steak knives. A sense of smell that Robert Bakker, paleontologist, describes as being equivalent to 100 bloodhounds all duct taped together. And a jaw which generated a bite force of around 8,000 pounds. That's twice as powerful as a saltwater crocodile. And that's exactly why I doubted. But there are a few Jehovah's Witnesses who were saying the same thing to me. They would ask, were you there 75, 150 million years ago? No. So you can't prove anything. I recognised that this logic was completely faulty. I mean, did anyone who said this to me actually believe that if you weren't there to see something happen, you can't prove it as being true or you can't believe it? Did they doubt that Jesus walked on water? Did they doubt that Moses split the Red Sea or that God created life? No. And yet this was a line that I was hearing more and more and more from Jehovah's Witnesses. To the point where I thought, I wonder if there exists anywhere in the world actual fossilised evidence of animals eating other animals. Because I knew that if I could find that sort of evidence, it would validate my doubt and it would completely blow apart the Jehovah's Witness timescale. And so with that in mind, I set off to a place where I thought I stood about as good a chance as anywhere else of finding evidence like that. the Natural History Museum in London. And thankfully, my journey there wasn't in vain, for I came across this. As I walked past this fossilised skull in the museum, I noticed something out of place at the back of this one's mouth. It was a bone from a fellow ichthyosaur, and was this animal's last ever meal. I had done it. My doubt had been validated, and I knew at that very moment there was no going back. I found other videos online, such as David Attenborough analysing a very similar fossil at the Natural History Museum of Stuttgart. I'll include a link in the video description to that video. And I concluded very quickly that life in the water had been carnivorous for hundreds of millions of years. But of course, could the same be said about life on land? My research led me in the direction of a T-Rex tooth crown that was found embedded in between two vertebrae of a hadrosaur tail. As there's healing around the tooth wound, paleontologists concluded that the hadrosaur not only survived the attack, but that it lived for years afterwards. This fossil showed beyond doubt that the T-Rex wasn't just a scavenger, but an active hunter. But among all the fossils that I would go on to look at, there is one that captures an extraordinary moment in time, the death of two animals as they were fighting. Here we have a velociraptor which had attacked a protoceratops, and in turn the protoceratops had pinned to the ground by the right arm the velociraptor. It was at this point during the fight that a sand dune collapsed and enveloped them in history. Contrary to what I was indoctrinated to believe, there was nothing special about the last 6,000 years. It was simply more of the same. More bloodshed, pain, suffering, and death. But the finger of blame was facing a new direction. No longer could I blame Satan for why animals behave in such a barbaric and bloodthirsty manner. I remember growing up watching nature documentaries with my dad, and there was always two things that were guaranteed. First, whenever David Attenborough mentioned evolution, Dad would go, evolution. But more pertinent to this discussion, the second thing, whenever an animal got attacked or was killed, Dad would say, Satan's system. I knew I could no longer say that. If Jehovah created these animals in these ecosystems, the buck would have to stop with him. When that sunk in, I began thinking about what sort of God would create these sort of food chains. And this need for blood. For example, I asked the question, whose side is Jehovah on? The herbivores or the carnivores? On the one hand, he creates ginormous killing machines with the need for blood and the tools to kill. And on the other hand, he creates herbivores with excellent defensive design and also very powerful, strong attacking weapons themselves. The only logical conclusion that I could come up with is that if God created the earth and life upon it, it wasn't designed to be a peaceful paradise. He created it to be his very own Colosseum in space, where because of his omnipresence, he can tune in live to watch 24/7 death among millions of species. Having adequately debunked the teachings on the Jehovah's Witness timescale regarding the past and the present, I then turned my attention to the future, to a global paradise, to a world in which I was told that I could look forward to playing fetch with a cheetah, to brushing the teeth of a crocodile, and to swimming in a jacuzzi of piranhas and jellyfish. I was looking forward to that world. And as I was looking through the Jehovah's Witness publications that depict the new system, there was one group of species of animal that was popping up more than any other. Cats. There were tigers and cheetahs and lions and more lions. I myself have 2 cats. And I know that Jehovah's Witnesses will say, well, there's your proof. See, they can live alongside you in peace, like they're originally intended to. But my doubt wasn't whether you can tame and domesticate animals over a lengthy period of time. My doubt was, according to your beliefs, Jehovah designed cats to be herbivorous. And yet when I offer my cats fresh vegetables, they say, no thanks. But when I offer them meat, they make noises like this. Let's remember that Jehovah's mission, when creating all 38 species of cats, apparently, was to design them all to be herbivorous, and so that they wouldn't attack other animals on Earth. Now, I'm not sure about you, but if that was my job, then the last thing I would do is give them razor-sharp retractable claws, piercing teeth, a metabolism, kidneys, intestinal tracts, which are all fine-tuned for eating other animals. I wouldn't design them so that instinctively, from just weeks of age, they want to catch, hunt and kill anything that moves. And the last thing I would do is ensure that their bodies cannot live without taking in meat. And yet when we look into the science of it, the evidence is damning. Because there are around 20 amino acids and nutrients that a cat's body simply cannot naturally produce or synthesize from taking in vegetation. Without trying to flog a dead horse too much, Jehovah did a terrible job of designing a herbivore. He literally couldn't have done worse. And so, if he wants cats to be in the new system, like all the literature says, then he needs to take all 38 species individually back into his design studio, edit them completely. Basically, we wouldn't be able to recognise them as cats anymore. And it was reasoning like this, with an elder in conversation, that led him to concede, maybe in the new system, animals will continue to eat other animals. Otherwise, some species would overpopulate the earth. But even if God created those animals to be like that, why does it matter? I almost fell off my chair when he said that to me. I thought, wow. For an elder to basically be saying, even if the whole JW timescale regarding animals is incorrect, even if the whole doctrine on the history of life on the earth is flat out wrong, why does it matter? Well, I'll tell you why it matters. Because that is not the God that you believe in. The God that you believe in is loving, kind, and hates to see pain and suffering. And yet, based on the evidence, it would suggest a God who is the exact antithesis to those things. One that loves to see bloodshed, pain, suffering, disease, starvation, and mass extinction, in which when we look back at history, 99% of all animals are now extinct. But worse than that, Jehovah's Witnesses told me that I was made in the image of God. That my best qualities, including my empathy for other humans and animals, was installed in me from Jehovah. And so that when I watch video clips of animals being eaten alive and crying out in pain, and it hurts my head and it scars my heart, that Jehovah feels even worse. That he can't wait to rectify the situation. If now I was to believe that, it would be an absolute insult to my brain. When I look back and ponder why for so long, despite having this doubt lingering at the back of my mind, why I never properly addressed it and researched it, I believe the main reason was because when I'd raise questions with elders and circuit overseers, they would say things such as, do you need to know why Jehovah made them? Don't go beyond the things written. Remember, he only includes in the Bible what we need to make it to the new system. He will give you an answer in due time. As you'd imagine, the words of these men who I respected so much had a big impact on me. They almost made me feel guilty for even questioning the topic, and it definitely prevented me from doing further research and investigating it more. But it's only now, looking back, that I can truly understand why they were so desperate to shift the focus away from them, the organisation, and the Bible onto me. And that's because the Bible is completely silent on the topic. But how does it make sense that humans have been on the planet 6,000 years and dinosaurs were on the planet 200 million years, and yet there's no mention of them at all in the scriptures? Well, it only doesn't make sense if you view the Bible as the inspired word of God. If you change perspective and view it as the words of people living thousands of years ago, with no understanding of modern paleontology, and without supernatural inspiration, then the silence we find on the topic is exactly what you would expect. However, just think about the implications if Jehovah actually inspired the Bible. Because Jehovah's Witnesses will be very quick to tell you that Jehovah used his foreknowledge to prophesy events which are happening today and will happen very shortly in future. The global preaching work, characteristics of people of the last days, cry of peace and security, ban on religion, etc. Jehovah knew all of this was going to happen, which would also mean that Jehovah knew that the fossil record would be unearthed and openly exposed for all of us to see. That it would lead many ones, myself included, into having doubts on the topic, to leave in his one true organisation, and then in turn being killed by him at Armageddon. And yet he still chose to be silent on the topic. The last time I met with a couple of elders, I took along with me this folder. A folder that just contained two things. First, my letter of disassociation, and also pictures of the three fossils that display carnivorous behaviour before 6,000 years ago. And so I asked them, are fossils apostasy? To which gratefully they said no. So then I asked, well, what do you make of these? I wanted their honest opinion. Did it influence their belief system in any way? And you should have seen the reaction of the one elder when I handed it to him. It was like I just took a decapitated human head out of a bag and passed it over. He was truly disgusted by it. Carl Sagan describes his reaction as one of the saddest lessons of history. He says, if we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. Rather than analysing the evidence with an open mind and being willing to allow your beliefs to be moulded by the evidence itself, it was far easier for him to just say, no, nonsense, Satan, apostasy, not interested. But for me, this was the first topic in which I had to hold my hands up and say, I am wrong. My beliefs are incorrect and they need to change. For so long, my mind was under that cult mind control of thinking that anything that exists outside of the organisation that I belong to may be contaminated by Satan. That truth only exists in the bubble of which I'm confined to. And yet, although this was just one topic, my mind had completely escaped that mental programming. I would go on to ask more, to research more, and to discover that there were many, many things that I considered to be fact, but were in fact nothing more than just fiction.